The envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, covered in dust and bearing a postmark from a Nevada town Thomas Wade had never heard of. He stood in his cramped apartment kitchen, bills piled high on the counter, and stared at the formal letterhead. His uncle Vernon had passed away 3 months ago, and Thomas had barely known the man. Vernon had been the family eccentric, disappearing into the desert decades ago and cutting ties with everyone. Thomas tore opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single page, written in his uncle's spidery handwriting, along with a small brass key attached to a leather cord. The letter was brief but strange. "Nephew, if you are reading this, then my time has ended. I leave you the crimson depths, my copper mine outside of Dustwell. The land is yours, the mine is yours, but most importantly, the treasure that breathes is yours. She has waited long enough. Do not fear her. The key will show you the way. Trust your heart, not your eyes. Uncle Vernon." Thomas read the letter 3 times, each reading leaving him more confused than the last. The treasure that breathes? His uncle had clearly lost his mind in the desert. Still, Thomas was drowning in debt from his failed restaurant venture, and even a worthless mine might sell for something. He packed a bag that evening and drove through the night toward Nevada. Dustwell lived up to its name. The town consisted of a gas station, a diner that looked abandoned, and a handful of buildings that seemed to be held together by rust and stubbornness. Thomas stopped at the gas station, where an elderly attendant gave him directions to the crimson depths. The man's expression changed when Thomas mentioned the mine. "That place has been sealed for 30 years, the attendant said quietly. "Your uncle never let anyone near it. Some folks say he went crazy out there. Others say he found something he should not have found." Thomas thanked the man and followed the directions down a dirt road that wound through rocky hills. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, painted in shades of red and orange by the setting sun. After 20 minutes, he spotted a chain-link fence surrounding a large area. A faded sign read, "Crimson Depths Mining Company. Private property." The gate was secured with a rusty padlock that looked decades old. Thomas used bolt cutters from his truck to break through, feeling only slightly guilty about destroying property he now technically owned. He drove through and parked near what appeared to be the main mine entrance. The entrance was not what Thomas expected. Instead of a simple hole in the ground or a wooden frame, he found a massive steel door built into the hillside. The door was covered in a layer of red dust, but showed no signs of rust. Strange geometric patterns were etched into its surface, designs that reminded Thomas of circuit boards mixed with ancient hieroglyphics. Thomas pulled out the brass key his uncle had left him. It was warm to the touch and covered in similar geometric patterns. He searched the door until he found a small circular indentation near the center. The key fit perfectly. When Thomas turned the key, he heard a deep hum from within the hillside. The geometric patterns on the door began to glow with a soft blue light. Then, with a mechanical whisper that suggested technology far more advanced than any mining equipment, the door slid open. Cool air rushed out, carrying a scent that was metallic and clean. Nothing like the musty dampness Thomas expected from an old mine. Blue lights flickered to life along the walls of a corridor that descended into the earth. The walls were smooth and metallic, definitely not carved from natural rock. "What the hell did you find, Uncle Vernon?" Thomas whispered. He descended slowly, his footsteps echoing off the strange walls. The corridor continued for about 200 feet before opening into a large chamber. As Thomas entered, more lights activated automatically, revealing a space that looked like something from a science fiction movie. The chamber was circular and roughly 40 feet across. The walls were lined with panels covered in those same geometric patterns, some glowing softly, others dark. In the center of the room stood a cylindrical pod made of a crystalline material that seemed to contain its own light. Complex machinery surrounded the pod, connected by cables that pulsed with energy. Thomas approached the pod slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. The crystalline surface was slightly opaque, but as he got closer, he could make out a shape inside. A figure? A small figure suspended in some kind of gel or liquid that glowed with a gentle amber light. His breath caught in his throat when he realized he was looking at a person. A tiny person. She could not have been more than 4 feet tall, with delicate features and proportions that seemed impossibly perfect. Her skin had a soft crimson hue that reminded Thomas of sunset clouds. Her hair was white, floating around her head like silk in water. She wore a garment that looked like it was woven from pure light, covering her tiny frame in bands of shimmering energy. "This is impossible," Thomas breathed, pressing his hand against the cool crystal surface. The moment his skin made contact with the pod, everything changed. The geometric patterns throughout the chamber blazed with golden light. The machinery around the pod roared to life, and the amber liquid inside began to drain away through hidden channels. The tiny figure inside twitched, her fingers flexing. Thomas stumbled backward as alarms he could not hear, but could feel vibrated through his bones. The crystal pod split down the middle with a hiss of releasing pressure. Vapor poured out, obscuring his vision. When it cleared, the tiny alien girl stood before him, her eyes now open and fixed on Thomas with an intensity that made his knees weak. Her eyes were gold, bright and luminous like coins catching firelight. She stepped out of the pod with surprising steadiness for someone who had apparently been asleep for who knows how long. When she spoke, her voice was musical, but speaking a language Thomas did not recognize. The words flowed like water over stones. Then something extraordinary happened. Thomas felt a warmth spread through his chest, not painful, but strange and overwhelming. Images flooded his mind. Stars he had never seen, worlds with purple skies, cities made of light, and beneath it all, emotions that were not his own. Loneliness, hope, relief. The tiny alien girl gasped and placed a small hand over her heart. She spoke again, and this time Thomas understood her, though her lips moved with different words than what he heard in his mind. "You freed me," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "After so long in the darkness, you finally came." Thomas found his voice, though it came out rough and uncertain. "Who are you? What are you?" The tiny alien girl stepped closer, tilting her head as she studied him with those golden eyes. She barely reached his chest in height, but there was nothing weak about her presence. "My name is Nexis. I am from a world called Veridium, beyond the stars your people have named. I came to your planet seeking knowledge many cycles ago, but I was betrayed, captured, imprisoned in that sleep chamber by those who feared what they could not understand." "How long have you been in there?" Thomas asked, his mind reeling. "I do not know," Nexis admitted. "Time becomes meaningless in suspended animation. But based on the decay patterns of the technology around us, I would estimate several of your decades. Perhaps 40 or 50 years. Thomas thought of his uncle, living alone out here for 30 years, guarding this secret. "My uncle, Vernon, did he know about you?" Nexis nodded, and Thomas saw sadness flicker across her crimson features. "Vernon found me by accident while searching for minerals. He was frightened at first, but he was also kind. He could not free me because he did not understand the technology, and he feared what would happen if he tried incorrectly. But he protected me. He made sure no one else found this place. He studied the chamber, trying to find a way to wake me safely." "The treasure that breathes," Thomas whispered, understanding his uncle's letter now. "He spoke of me?" Nexis asked, her golden eyes brightening. "In a letter. He left me this place when he died. And the key." Thomas showed her the brass object still clutched in his hand. Nexis took the key gently, her small fingers brushing against Thomas's palm. The touch sent another wave of warmth through him, and he saw more images flash through his mind. This time he saw his uncle, younger, standing in this very chamber and talking to Nexis through the crystal pod. Vernon had spent hours here, learning from her despite the barrier between them. "He was my friend," Nexis said softly. "The only friend I had in my imprisonment. I could communicate with him telepathically through the pod, though it was difficult and exhausting for both of us. He promised he would find a way to free me, or find someone who could. And he left that task to me," Thomas said, looking around the chamber. "But I am no scientist. I do not understand any of this technology." Nexis smiled for the first time, and it transformed her face into something that made Thomas's heart skip. "You do not need to understand it. You have already freed me. The key was encoded with your genetic signature, passed down through your family line. Only someone with your specific DNA pattern could activate the release sequence without destroying me." Thomas absorbed this information slowly. "So what happens now? Are you stuck here? Can you go home?" The tiny alien girl walked back to the pod, placing her hand on its surface. The machinery around them dimmed slightly. "My ship is damaged, but not destroyed. It lies deeper beneath this mountain, in chambers your uncle could never access. With time and help, I could potentially repair it. But there is something you must understand, Thomas Wade." She turned back to him, her golden eyes serious. "When you touched the activation panel and freed me, a bond was created between us. It is part of my people's survival mechanism, designed to protect us when we are vulnerable. Your life force is now connected to mine. We cannot be separated by great distances without causing harm to both of us." Thomas felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean that you are bound to me now, and I to you. If I travel more than a certain distance from you, both of us will experience increasing pain and eventually death. The bond will strengthen over time, but it is permanent, unbreakable by any known technology." The implications crashed over Thomas like a wave. His life, his freedom, everything had just changed in an instant. He had come here looking for a way to solve his financial problems, and instead he had bound himself to a tiny alien girl from another world. "Why did you not warn me?" he asked, though without real anger. The damage was done. Nexis looked down at her small hands. "I tried. When you touched the pod, I sent you warnings telepathically. But the communication was unclear, and you were already committed to the action. I am sorry. If I could undo it, I might. But I also confess I am grateful. The loneliness of that chamber was slowly driving me to madness. You saved me from that fate, even if you did not intend to bind yourself in the process." Thomas ran his hands through his hair, trying to process everything. A tiny alien girl. A telepathic bond. Advanced technology hidden under a Nevada desert. It was too much, too fast. Yet when he looked at Nexis, standing there in her garments of light with those hopeful golden eyes, he could not bring himself to regret what he had done. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, we will figure this out, together. You said your ship might be repairable?" Nexis nodded eagerly, her white hair floating slightly as if moved by an invisible breeze. "Yes, but it will require time and resources. And there is another problem." "What problem?" "The activation of my stasis chamber released a significant energy signature. If any of your world's governments are monitoring for such anomalies, and they almost certainly are, they will have detected it. They will come to investigate. And when they find me, they will not simply let me leave. I am a source of technology and knowledge they will want to possess and study." Thomas felt a chill run down his spine. "How long do we have?" Nexis closed her golden eyes, seeming to sense something beyond normal perception. "Hours, perhaps a day at most. We must prepare quickly. Come, I will show you the deeper chambers where my ship rests. We have much to discuss and very little time." She held out her small hand to him. Thomas hesitated for only a moment before taking it. Her skin was warm and sent pleasant tingles up his arm. The moment their hands joined, he felt that connection between them solidify, becoming real and tangible in a way he could not fully explain, but understood instinctively. A tiny alien girl led him toward a section of wall that looked solid but slid open at her approach, revealing a stairway descending even deeper into the earth. As they walked down together into the unknown, Thomas realized his life had just been divided into two parts. Everything before this moment and everything after. He had freed the treasure that breathes, and in doing so, had become treasured himself. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The tiny alien girl from Veridium and the failed restaurateur from California. Bound by technology, neither fully understood, but both would have to trust. The adventure was only beginning. The stairway descended for what felt like miles. Though Thomas suspected the disorienting geometry of the ancient structure made it difficult to judge true distance. Nexis moved ahead of him with surprising confidence, her small hand still clasped in his. The walls around them pulsed with soft light that seemed to respond to her presence, brightening as she passed and dimming behind them. "This facility was built by my people centuries ago," Nexis explained as they walked. "We established research outposts on many worlds, seeking to understand the diversity of life throughout the galaxy. Earth was particularly fascinating because your species was on the verge of significant evolutionary leaps in consciousness and technology." Thomas tried to wrap his mind around the implications. "So you have been visiting Earth for centuries? Are all those stories about ancient aliens actually true?" The tiny alien girl glanced back at him with an amused expression. "Some of them contain fragments of truth, though your people have a tendency to exaggerate and mythologize what they cannot explain. We did not build your pyramids or teach you agriculture. We simply observed, occasionally interacted, and documented your progress. We have strict protocols about interference with developing civilizations." "But you crashed here," Thomas said. "That seems like pretty significant interference." Nexis's expression darkened. "That was not supposed to happen. My mission was routine reconnaissance in the 1960s, during your Cold War period. Your governments were testing nuclear weapons and primitive space technology. We wanted to ensure you did not destroy yourselves before reaching full stellar maturity. But something went wrong with my ship's cloaking system. I was detected by military radar and attacked. The damage forced me to crash land in this desert region." They reached the bottom of the stairs and entered another massive chamber. This one was easily 3 times the size of the room above, with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness. But what dominated the space was the ship. It rested in the center of the chamber like a sleeping giant, roughly the size of a large house, but with organic curves and smooth surfaces that seemed to shift and shimmer in the dim light. Parts of it were clearly damaged, with exposed sections revealing crystalline structures within. "Veridium technology grows," Nexis explained, seeing his wonder. "Our ships are partially alive, biomechanical entities that bond with their pilots. This vessel has been dormant without me to sustain it, but it still lives. I can feel its consciousness reaching out to mine, weak but present." Thomas approached the ship slowly, almost reverently. Up close, he could see fine details in its surface, patterns that reminded him of both organic cell structures and advanced circuitry. "It is beautiful. Can you really repair it?" Nexis walked to the ship and placed both hands on its surface. The moment she made contact, light rippled outward from her touch like waves on water. The ship responded with a deep hum that Thomas felt in his chest. "I can repair it, but not alone and not quickly. The damage is extensive. Some components will need to be fabricated using materials from your world. Others can be regenerated if I provide enough energy to restart the ship's healing systems. Energy, Thomas repeated, remembering what she had said about their bond. You mean from me? A tiny alien girl turned to face him, her golden eyes serious. Our bond allows me to draw upon your life force, yes. But do not misunderstand. I am not a parasite. The exchange flows both ways. As I draw energy from you, you also draw knowledge and abilities from me. Over time, you will find yourself capable of things no normal human can do. Enhanced strength, faster healing, expanded mental capabilities. The bond transforms both parties. Thomas felt that warmth in his chest again, the sensation of their connection pulsing with each heartbeat. Is that already happening? I have been feeling strange since you woke up, warm, like there is electricity running under my skin. Yes, Nexis said softly, stepping closer to him. That is the bond establishing itself fully. For the first few days, it will feel intense as our energies synchronize. Eventually, it will become as natural as breathing. You will always be aware of me, and I of you, but it will not be uncomfortable. She reached up and placed her small hand over his heart. Thomas was struck again by how tiny she was, barely reaching his chest, even with her hand raised. Yet the power that flowed from her touch was immense. He saw flashes of her world, Veridium, a planet of towering crystal cities and vast oceans of liquid light. Beings like her, crimson-skinned and golden-eyed, moving through spaces of impossible beauty. He felt her emotions too, the joy of flight among the stars, the terror of her crash, the crushing loneliness of decades in the stasis chamber. I can see your memories, Thomas whispered, awed by the intimacy of the connection. And I can see yours, Nexis replied. Her golden eyes shimmered with what might have been tears. I see your struggles, Thomas weighed, your failures that you perceive as shameful, but which I recognize as learning experiences. Your loneliness that mirrors my own. Your dreams of something more than the small life you have been living. We are not so different, you and I, despite coming from different worlds. Thomas felt something shift inside him at her words. This tiny alien girl understood him in a way no one else ever had. The bond between them was not just physical or mystical. It was emotional and intellectual. She saw all of him, the good and the bad, and accepted it without judgment. What do we do now? He asked quietly. You said people would come looking for the energy signature. How do we protect ourselves? Nexis withdrew her hand reluctantly and turned back to the ship. First, we must establish basic defenses. This facility has security systems that were deactivated when the stasis chambers shut down to conserve power. I can reactivate them, but it will drain energy from both of us. Are you willing? Thomas did not hesitate. Whatever you need to do, do it. We are in this together now. The tiny alien girl smiled at him with genuine warmth. You have a brave heart, Thomas Wade. Come, place your hands here beside mine. Thomas moved to stand next to her, his larger hands settling on the ship's surface next to her smaller ones. The moment full contact was established, the warmth in his chest became a furnace. Energy poured out of him in waves, flowing through Nexis and into the ship. The crystalline structures within began to glow brighter, and the hum increased in pitch and intensity. Thomas felt dizzy, as if he had been running for hours, but he held firm. Through his connection with Nexis, he could sense what was happening. The ship was waking up, its dormant systems coming back online one by one. Security grids activating, sensors extending throughout the facility and beyond. Defensive shields powering up around the mountain itself. Then, suddenly, the energy flow reversed. Power surged back from the ship into Nexis, and then into Thomas. He gasped as knowledge flooded his mind. the layout of the entire facility, the principles of Veridium technology, languages he had never heard but could now understand, mathematics that operated on principles beyond anything taught on Earth. When it finally ended, both of them staggered away from the ship, breathing heavily. Thomas caught Nexis as her small legs gave out, cradling the tiny alien girl against his chest. She weighed almost nothing, like holding a bird. Her white hair brushed against his face, soft as silk and carrying that same metallic scent from earlier. That was intense, Thomas managed, his voice shaky. Nexis nodded against his chest. The ship accepted you as my bonded companion. It shared its knowledge base with you. You now carry within your mind information that would take human scientists centuries to understand. You are no longer entirely human, Thomas. The transformation has begun. Thomas set her down gently once her legs seemed steady, though he kept a supportive hand on her shoulder. What do you mean, no longer entirely human? The bond changes you on a cellular level, the tiny alien girl explained, looking up at him with those mesmerizing golden eyes. Already your DNA is adapting, incorporating elements of Veridium genetic structure. You will live longer than any human. You will heal faster. Your mind will process information at accelerated speeds. In time, you may even develop other abilities: telepathy, energy manipulation, the capacity to survive in environments that would kill a normal human. Thomas should have been terrified by this revelation. He was being transformed into something other than what he had been, without truly consenting to it. Yet all he felt was fascination and a strange rightness about it all, as if some part of him had always known he was meant for something more than his ordinary life. Will I still be me? He asked, voicing his deepest concern. Nexis reached up and cupped his face with her small hands. The gesture was tender and reassuring. You will always be Thomas Wade. The core of who you are cannot be changed by genetic alteration or energy bonding. You will simply become the fullest version of yourself, the version you were always meant to be. A loud boom echoed through the facility, making both of them jump. The ship's newly activated sensors immediately fed information to Thomas's mind. Multiple vehicles approaching, armed personnel, advanced scanning equipment. The military had arrived faster than Nexis had predicted. They are here, Nexis said unnecessarily, her expression hardening. At least 50 soldiers, heavily armed. They have brought equipment designed to penetrate underground structures. They know something is down here. Thomas felt surprisingly calm despite the danger. The knowledge flooding his mind included tactical information, strategic thinking beyond his previous capabilities. The facility defenses you activated. Will they hold? For a time, Nexis confirmed. The shields will prevent them from simply blasting their way in, but they will try to breach the main entrance, and eventually they will succeed. We need more time to restore the ship to flight capability. How much more time? The tiny alien girl pressed her hands to the ship again, communing with its consciousness. At minimum, 12 hours. Possibly as long as 24. The ship's healing systems are active, but the damage is extensive. Some components will need to be physically replaced or reconstructed. Another boom, closer this time. Thomas could hear sounds of drilling from somewhere above. We do not have 12 hours. Is there any way to speed up the process? Nexis turned to him, and he saw conflict in her golden eyes. There is one way. A deep bonding. If we fully merge our energies, I can channel exponentially more power into the ship's regeneration systems. But Thomas, such a bonding is irreversible and profoundly intimate. It is what my people do, only with life partners. Once done, we would be connected at the deepest possible level. Our thoughts, our emotions, our very souls would be intertwined forever. Thomas understood what she was really saying. She was offering him a choice. remain partially bonded as they were now, with some independence preserved, or commit fully to her and accept all the consequences. It was a marriage of sorts, but far more binding than any human ceremony could create. He thought of his life before this day. The emptiness, the lack of purpose, the feeling that he was always meant for something more, but never finding it. Then he thought of what he had experienced in just these few hours with Nexis. The wonder, the connection, the sense of rightness that had been absent from his entire existence until now. "Teach me what to do," Thomas said firmly. Relief and something deeper, something that might have been love, flickered across the tiny alien girl's features. "Are you certain? Once done, there is no returning to what you were." "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." Nexis took both his hands in hers, her small fingers intertwining with his larger ones. "Then we must go to the bonding chamber. The ship alone cannot facilitate this. We need the specialized equipment deeper in the facility." She led him through another doorway that opened at her mental command. They entered a smaller circular room with a raised platform in the center. Crystalline pillars surrounded the platform, reaching from floor to ceiling and pulsing with inner light. The air here felt charged, almost alive. "Remove your outer garments," Nexis instructed, releasing his hands and beginning to unfasten her own garments of light. "The bonding requires direct contact between our energy fields. Clothing interferes with the process." Thomas hesitated only briefly before pulling off his shirt and kicking off his shoes. By the time he had stripped down to his underwear, Nexis had shed her light garments entirely. Her tiny crimson form was breathtaking, perfect in every detail, despite her small stature. She showed no embarrassment at her nudity, treating it as simply practical for what was to come. "Come," she said, stepping onto the platform and holding out her hand. Thomas joined her, and immediately the crystalline pillars flared brighter. Nexis guided him to sit cross-legged on the platform, then positioned herself in his lap, her small legs wrapping around his waist. Despite their size difference, it felt natural, comfortable, right. "Place your hands on my back," she instructed softly. "I will place mine on your chest. When the bonding begins, do not resist. Open yourself completely to me, as I will open myself to you. Let our energies merge, without holding anything back." Thomas did as instructed, his hands spanning most of her tiny back. Nexis placed her small palms flat against his chest, directly over his heart. Her golden eyes locked with his. "I need you to understand something before we begin," she said quietly. "This is not just about survival or repairing my ship. I am choosing you, Thomas Wade, not because the initial bond trapped us together, but because in the short time I have known you, I have seen your heart, your kindness, your courage. You freed me from a prison that was destroying me. You accepted the bond without bitterness. You look at me not as an alien curiosity, but as a person. I want this connection with you. I want you as my bonded mate." Thomas felt his eyes burn with unexpected emotion. No one had ever chosen him before. Not really. Every relationship in his past had felt conditional, temporary, doomed to fail. But this tiny alien girl, this extraordinary being from beyond the stars, was offering him something permanent and real. "I choose you too, Nexis," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I do not fully understand what I am getting into, but I know I want it. I want you. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Nexis smiled, and then she leaned forward and kissed him. The moment their lips met, the crystalline pillars exploded with light. Energy poured through Thomas like nothing he had ever experienced. It was not painful, but it was overwhelming, intense, all-consuming. He felt Nexis inside his mind, but not as a separate presence. She was becoming part of him, her consciousness merging with his own. He saw her entire life flash before him. her childhood on Veridium, her training as a scout, her first flights among the stars, the wonder she felt discovering new worlds, the terror of her crash, the decades of isolation in the stasis chamber, the moment she saw him for the first time and felt hope again. At the same time, she was experiencing all of him. His memories, his thoughts, his dreams and fears. Nothing was hidden. They were becoming one being while somehow remaining two. The energy built to an almost unbearable peak, and then suddenly released in a wave that left both of them gasping. Thomas found himself lying on his back on the platform with Nexis collapsed on his chest. Her tiny form rose and fell with her breathing, perfectly synchronized with his own. He could feel her heartbeat as if it were his own. He could sense her thoughts, her emotions, her presence in a way that made their earlier connection seem like a whisper compared to this symphony. "We are bonded," Nexis whispered against his chest. "Truly and completely. You are mine and I am yours, now and forever." Thomas wrapped his arms around her tiny frame, holding her close. "I can feel you, inside me. It is incredible." "And I feel you," she replied, nuzzling against him. "Your strength, your determination, your love." The word should have frightened him, but it did not, because he could feel it flowing between them now, undeniable and powerful. He loved this tiny alien girl, and she loved him. Not because they were forced together, but because they had chosen each other in the deepest way possible. A tremendous explosion somewhere above shook the entire facility. Reality came crashing back. They were still in danger. The military was still trying to breach the compound. Nexis sat up, her golden eyes now glowing with power. "The bonding is complete. We can channel energy now at levels that would have destroyed us before. Come, we must return to the ship. We have work to do, and now we have the power to do it." They dressed quickly and returned to the main chamber. The ship seemed to sense the change in their bond immediately. Its surfaces brightened as they approached, and Thomas could feel its consciousness reaching out to them both now, accepting him fully as Nexis's chosen mate. Together they placed their hands on the ship. This time when the energy flowed, it was like a tidal wave. Thomas felt power pouring out of him and through Nexis, amplified by their bonding, channeled with perfect efficiency into the ship's damaged systems. Throughout the vessel, repairs accelerated dramatically. Crystalline structures regrew at visible speeds. Damaged circuits reforged themselves. Whole sections that had been dead for decades roared back to life. The ship was healing, faster than should have been possible. Above them, the sounds of drilling and explosives grew louder. The military was close to breaching the facility. But Thomas and Nexis did not break their contact. They poured everything they had into the ship, trusting it to save them as they saved it. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. Thomas lost track of time, lost in the flow of energy and the intimate connection with both Nexis and the ship. He was dimly aware of voices echoing from above. Soldiers had breached the upper chamber. They would reach the lower levels soon. "Just a little longer," Nexis urged, her small body trembling with the effort of channeling so much power. "The ship is almost ready. The flight systems are coming online." Thomas gritted his teeth and pushed harder, drawing on reserves he did not know he possessed. The bond with Nexis amplified everything. He could feel her determination matching his own, their wills unified in purpose. With a final surge that left them both on their knees, the ship completed its primary repairs. Systems that had been dead for decades hummed with full power. The consciousness within the vessel was fully awake now, intelligent and aware. It communicated directly to their minds, gratitude and readiness flowing through the connection. "It is ready," Nexis gasped, helping Thomas to his feet despite her own exhaustion. "We must board immediately. They are almost here." They heard voices from the stairway. Soldiers were descending. Thomas and Nexis stumbled toward an opening that had appeared in the ship's side, revealing an entrance. They barely made it inside before armed men burst into the chamber. "Stop! Do not move," a voice commanded. "By order of the United States government, you are ordered to surrender." But it was too late. The ship's entrance sealed behind them with a thought from Nexis. The interior was warm and welcoming, organic surfaces adapting to their presence. Nexis pulled Thomas toward what he instinctively knew was the pilot chamber. "Can you really fly this?" Thomas asked, though through their bond he already knew the answer. The tiny alien girl grinned at him, a fierce joy lighting her features. "I have been flying ships since before you were born, Thomas Wade. Hold on to something. This is going to be spectacular." She settled into the pilot position, a crystalline seat that molded itself to her tiny form. Thomas stood behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders, their bond allowing him to share in the experience of flight. Through the ship's sensors, he could see the soldiers scrambling away as the vessel's engines powered up. Energy gathered beneath them. The ship's systems synchronized perfectly with Nexis's mind and through her with Thomas's. They were not just passengers. They were part of the ship now, as it was part of them. With a roar that shook the entire mountain, the ship lifted off. Stone and earth that had buried it for decades crumbled away like dust. The vessel rose through the chamber ceiling as if it were not there, the advanced matter phase technology allowing it to pass through solid rock. They exploded out of the mountain into the Nevada night. Military vehicles scattered below as the ship climbed impossibly fast toward the stars. Within seconds, they had breached the atmosphere. Within minutes, they were in orbit, looking down at Earth's blue and white beauty. Thomas stared at the view in awe, seeing his home planet from a perspective no human had ever experienced except astronauts. But he was more than human now. He was bonded to a tiny alien girl from another world, transformed by technology and love into something new. What now? He asked, squeezing Nexis's shoulders gently. She reached up to place her small hand over his, her golden eyes reflected in the crystalline viewport. "Now we go home, to Veridium. I have been away for so long, Thomas. I want you to see my world, to meet my people, to understand where I come from. Will they accept me?" Through their bond, he felt her confidence. "They will accept you because I have chosen you, because you are my bonded mate, and because you are no longer just human. You are something new, something that bridges two worlds." The ship turned toward deep space, its navigation systems calculating the journey ahead. It would take months to reach Veridium, even at faster-than-light speeds, but time no longer seemed like an enemy. Thomas and Nexis had all the time in the universe now. The journey through the stars was unlike anything Thomas could have imagined in his previous life. The ship, which Nexis called Cylindra in her native language, was not just a vessel but a living companion. Its consciousness communicated with them through subtle vibrations and emotional impressions, expressing contentment at being whole again and gratitude for having purpose once more. During the first weeks of travel, Thomas adapted to his new reality. His transformation continued gradually, but noticeably. He found he needed less sleep, and when he did sleep, his dreams were filled with visions of places he had never been, but somehow recognized. Veridium cities rising like music made solid, crystal oceans that sang with their own light, beings who looked like Nexis, going about lives that were completely alien, yet strangely familiar. "Those are my memories you are experiencing," Nexis explained one morning as they shared breakfast in the ship's living quarters. The tiny alien girl sat cross-legged on the table while Thomas ate, comfortable with the height difference that allowed them to maintain eye contact. "The bonding is still integrating. Eventually, you will have full access to everything I have ever experienced, just as I have access to your memories. Thomas swallowed a bite of synthesized food that tasted remarkably like scrambled eggs. It does not bother you? Having someone else in your head all the time? Nexis smiled, her golden eyes warm. It is strange at first, yes, but intimacy requires vulnerability. I know everything about you now, Thomas. Your embarrassing moments, your secret shamas, your private joys. And I love you more because of it, not less. You are beautiful in your complexity and flaws. Thomas felt emotion tighten his throat. In his old life, he had always feared being truly known, believing that exposure would lead to rejection. But Nexis had seen every dark corner of his soul and had not turned away. If anything, understanding his struggles had deepened her affection. I feel the same about you, he said quietly. When I see your memories of those decades alone in the stasis chamber, the loneliness you endured, it breaks my heart. But it also shows me your incredible strength. You did not let it destroy you. The tiny alien girl reached across the table to take his hand, her small fingers wrapping around his much larger ones. We both survived our prisons, Thomas. You were trapped in a life that never fit. I was trapped in a chamber of crystal and metal. But we are free now, together. As the journey continued, Thomas began to develop abilities that went beyond enhanced strength and endurance. One evening, while practicing meditation exercises Nexis had taught him, he managed to levitate a small object using only his mind. It was just a spoon, and it wobbled unsteadily in the air for only a few seconds before clattering back to the table. But it was undeniably real. Telekinesis, Nexis said excitedly, clapping her small hands together. I knew you would develop it eventually. Your mind is adapting to perceive and manipulate the energy fields that permeate all matter. With practice, you will be able to move much larger objects. This is insane, Thomas muttered, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. A few months ago, I was a failed restaurant owner drowning in debt. Now I am flying through space with telekinetic powers, bonded to a beautiful tiny alien girl. Nexis giggled, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. She hopped down from her seat and walked to him, her head barely reaching his chest even when he was sitting. Life rarely follows the paths we plan for it. Sometimes the universe has better ideas than we do. Thomas pulled her into his lap as she curled against him with perfect trust. Despite her small size, she never seemed fragile. There was strength in her tiny frame, a core of resilience that had allowed her to survive isolation that would have destroyed most beings. He kissed the top of her white hair, breathing in her scent that reminded him of ozone and something sweetly metallic. Tell me about Veridium, he said. I have seen glimpses in your memories, but tell me what it is really like. The tiny alien girl settled more comfortably against him, her voice taking on a dreamy quality. Imagine a world where art and science are the same thing, where cities grow rather than being built, shaped by collective consciousness into forms that serve beauty and function equally. The sky shifts through colors your human eyes have never seen, frequencies of light that Earth's atmosphere filters out. We have 3 moons, and when they align just right, the tides in our crystal oceans create harmonics that can be heard across the entire planet. It sounds like paradise, Thomas said softly. It has its problems, like any world, Nexis admitted. But yes, it is beautiful. And I have been away from it for so long. I miss the taste of our native fruits. I miss the feel of crystal sand beneath my feet. Most of all, I miss my family. My parents must believe I died decades ago. The joy they will feel when I return will be overwhelming. Will they approve of me? Thomas asked, voicing the concern that had been growing in his mind. Nexis tilted her head back to look up at him, her golden eyes serious. My people value bonds above all else. The fact that we are bonded at the deepest level will mean everything to them. Yes, you are from a developing world, and traditionally, We do not bond with species who have not achieved stellar civilization status. But extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary acceptance. Besides, she grinned mischievously, you are not entirely human anymore. Your DNA has been modified by our bonding. You are something new, the first of a hybrid kind. Thomas pondered this. Will there be others like me? Other humans who bond with your people? Perhaps someday, Nexis said thoughtfully. If humanity survives its current challenges and reaches for the stars in peace rather than war. We have protocols about contact with developing species, but those protocols can change. You may become a bridge between our worlds, Thomas. An example of what is possible when beings from different origins choose each other. The weeks became months. Thomas's abilities continued to develop under Nexis's patient guidance. He learned to sense energy fields, to manipulate them in small ways, to communicate telepathically across the ship's interior. His body continued to change too, becoming more efficient, more resilient. When he cut himself accidentally, the wound healed within minutes instead of days. You will live for centuries now, Nexis told him matter-of-factly one day. My people typically live for 500 to 600 years barring accident or illness. You have been transformed to match my physiology. We will grow old together very, very slowly. Thomas tried to imagine living for centuries and could not quite grasp it. But he found he was not frightened by the prospect. With Nexis by his side, even immortality seemed manageable. As they approached the outer boundaries of Veridium's star system, Nexis grew increasingly animated. She spent hours at the ship's navigation console, her small hands dancing across crystalline controls with practiced ease. Thomas watched her work, fascinated by how natural she looked in this environment. This was her true element. The stranded prisoner he had freed from the Nevada mine was gone, replaced by a confident pilot returning home after an impossibly long exile. We will arrive within 3 days, she announced excitedly. I am already detecting communications networks. Let me send an identification signal so they do not mistake us for an unknown vessel. She transmitted a complex pattern of energy that the ship translated as her personal signature code. Within moments, responses flooded back. Even without understanding the language yet, Thomas could hear the shock and joy in the voices that answered. They think I am a ghost, Nexis laughed, tears streaming down her crimson cheeks. They cannot believe I am alive. I am telling them I will explain everything when we arrive, and that I am bringing someone special with me. The final approach to Veridium was spectacular. As they dropped out of faster-than-light travel, Thomas got his first direct look at Nexis's home world. It was smaller than Earth, with vast continents connected by narrow land bridges over oceans that literally glowed with bioluminescence. The crystalline cities Nexis had described rose from the surface like natural formations, spiraling towers and graceful arches that caught and refracted the light from the system's violet-tinged sun. It is beautiful, Thomas breathed, pressing close to the viewport. Welcome home, Nexis whispered, taking his hand. Both of our homes now. As they entered atmosphere, a formation of ships rose to meet them. Sleek vessels similar to Cylindra, but more recent in design, their hulls shimmering with what Thomas now recognized as active camouflage fields. A voice spoke through the ship's communication system, and this time Thomas understood the words thanks to the linguistic knowledge Nexis had shared through their bond. Pilot Nexis Coralla, you are cleared for landing at Havendra Spire. Your family has been notified and awaits you. Be advised that protocol requires medical evaluation given the length of your absence. Welcome home, child of Veridium. We thought you lost forever. Nexis responded with formal acknowledgments, but her voice shook with emotion. They descended toward one of the crystal spires, and a landing platform extended from its side like a welcoming hand. Cylindra settled onto it with barely a tremor, the ship communicating its own joy at being home through pulses of warm contentment that both Thomas and Nexis felt. "Are you ready?" Nexis asked, turning to Thomas. Her tiny hand squeezed his tightly. "Once we step out of this ship, everything changes. You will be the first human to walk on Veridium. There will be questions, examinations, probably some controversy. Are you prepared for that?" Thomas pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "As long as I am with you, I can handle anything." They walked to the ship's exit together. The door opened, and warm air rushed in, carrying scents that were alien but not unpleasant. Something like cinnamon mixed with metal and growing things. Thomas took a deep breath and stepped out onto Veridium soil for the first time. The platform was crowded with beings like Nexis, crimson-skinned, golden-eyed, ranging in height from 4 to 5 feet tall. All stared at Thomas with expressions of shock. He towered over them, easily a foot and a half taller than the tallest Veridian present. His pale human skin and dark hair stood in stark contrast to their coloring. Then a pair of Veridians pushed through the crowd, and Nexis made a sound Thomas had never heard from her before. A cry of pure joy. She released his hand and ran to them, her tiny form crashing into their embrace. Her parents, Thomas realized. After decades of separation, the tiny alien girl was reunited with her family. He stood back, giving them space for their moment. The mother held Nexis's face in her small hands, speaking rapidly in a language that Thomas's newly acquired knowledge translated automatically. "My daughter, my precious daughter, we mourned you. We held ceremonies for your spirit. And now you stand before us alive. How is this possible?" Nexis pulled back, her golden eyes finding Thomas in the crowd. She extended her hand toward him, and he moved forward to join her. Every Veridian present watched him with fascination and some trepidation. He was an unknown, something that had never walked on their world before. "Mother, father," Nexis said formally, switching to English for Thomas's benefit, even though he could understand her native tongue now. "This is Thomas Wade. He freed me from imprisonment on his world. He is my bonded mate. We are joined at the deepest level." The shocked silence that followed was profound. Nexis's mother looked between her daughter and Thomas with wide golden eyes. Bonded? To a being from a developing world? Nexis, such a thing is unprecedented. The consequences could be severe. "I do not care about precedent," Nexis said firmly, her small hand squeezing Thomas's with surprising strength. "He saved me. He transformed himself to be with me. He gave up his world and his people to travel to mine. I love him, and he loves me. Our bond is legitimate and complete. If the Council has issues with that, they can take them up with me directly." Thomas watched as Nexis's father studied him with keen intelligence. The older male was perhaps 4.5 feet tall, with the same crimson skin and golden eyes as his daughter, though his white hair had streaks of silver through it. After a long moment, he surprised Thomas by extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Welcome to Veridium, Thomas Wade," he said in perfect English. "Any being who would sacrifice everything to protect my daughter has earned my respect, regardless of their origin. We will face whatever challenges arise together." Relief flooded through Thomas as he shook the smaller being's hand. "Thank you, sir. I know this is irregular, but I promise you, I will spend my life protecting and cherishing her." "I can see that," Nexis's father said with a slight smile. "The bond is visible to those who know how to look. Your energy fields are completely intertwined. Whatever controversies may arise, no one can deny the legitimacy of your connection." Over the following weeks, Thomas was indeed subjected to extensive examination and questioning. Medical experts studied his transformed physiology with fascination. Council members interviewed him about Earth and humanity. Some expressed concern about the implications of a human bonding with one of their kind, worrying about what it might mean for future interactions with his species. But through it all, Nexis stood by his side, her tiny presence a constant reassurance.